And that's kind of where GE is today in our development. So we have full teams of people. Let's pick India. We've got probably 5,000 engineers, maybe 7,000 engineers in India, probably 5,000 PhDs. And probably half of what they do is in India for India. And they're developing an X-ray machine that can be sold for $10,000. They're developing a reverse osmosis kit that can go into a village in India economically, a mobile unit that can move around India to purify water. And the notion is that my own hypothesis is that some of those products, maybe half those products, end up being sold back in the United States someday, maybe, or Canada, where you are. That are high quality, low cost, work in a different business model. And that's the vision I'd say we have for the bottom of the pyramid. Is both think about it from the standpoint of expanding our ability to earn money in India, but also think about it more broadly to say, look, the healthcare industry in the United States has got terrible cost constraints. Why can't we develop more high quality, low cost products that can help the healthcare industry in this country as time goes on? And that's the way we kind of try to think about the world. We have a process in GE called Imagination Breakthroughs. It's a way that I can put attention on key innovation projects. And 18 of the Imagination Breakthroughs we have inside the company are bottom of the pyramid type of activity. And I track these on an ongoing basis, and I can kind of study what we're learning, where we're going, that kind of stuff. Uh-oh, this got like 6 more questions, so I must have said something wrong. Go ahead. What did I say wrong? Oh my God. Go ahead, I'll repeat it.
I'm Nigel Croft.
Go ahead.
Nigel Croft from Hong Kong Quality Assurance Agency. I think it's very clear that CSR is core to the values of GE. How do you drive that passion and those values down through the GE supply chain?
So, great question. We have ongoing supplier quality programs everywhere in the world. And so we have kind of separate people that would work, let's say, in China, whose only job it is to go out and do supplier quality audits, meetings of suppliers, making them do formal audits, getting signatures on events, having them come in and do training. And then those people might be embedded into let's say they're part of our healthcare business, our energy business. Then we go over the top with a corporate audit staff that goes in and just audits those suppliers. So I'm not sure we get to every supplier every year, but I bet on a 24-month cycle we get to every supplier globally and are able to do kind of formal, what are the raw materials, what are they doing, how are they training, do they adhere to the labor standards of the country or the labor standards that we have, and it just requires more resources. And I would say every year we fire suppliers who don't follow those procedures or dealers who don't follow those procedures. So the only way you know the program is working is if you're firing people. The program doesn't work if people come back and say, everything's, look, this was the stuff that I hate when Bob puts in our citizenship report, but 320,000 people, today you got some portion of them that aren't doing what I want them to do. You got to know that. You got to be skeptical and cynical about that. And what I tell our internal people is the one thing you got to know is I'm going to find you and I'm going to fire you. That's the only consolation that we can have, is that we aggressively audit. And I look at people that say I didn't have any findings. That's a bad answer. Not that I want them to make things up, but you just know that in these places you're going to find stuff. You want to find stuff, and you want the culture where people think that bringing things forward. In other words, we've got an ombuds process that's very formal, and you want the ombuds inputs growing in some strange way. In other words, you don't want it when it's going down. That may be a bad sign. And so that's how we try to run. But you don't get anywhere without doing really a lot of auditing. And I think that's always going to be true. A couple more. Yeah, right there. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Alison Warhurst, Warwick Business School and founding director of Maplecroft. I was very inspired by your speech, and particularly the way you underlined the corporate part of corporate social responsibility. Now, GE, like many of the brands here, have major supply chain networks, and it's building on that last question. In this downturn, it's very easy for SMEs, for small businesses, particularly globally, to be really squeezed. And I wondered if there's anything about responsible globalization that you could comment on, where GE and other brands could take a leadership role with respect to their business relationships with suppliers at this difficult time, so we don't lose their innovative capabilities, we don't lose what they can contribute to an upturn later. Thank you.
I think it's a great question. You know, it's interesting. I don't know, where do you live? Right? Do you live in the U.S. or are you in the UK? Yeah, I suspected. So I was in the UK, Germany, Spain, France last week, and the notion of the SME is almost a romantic notion across Europe. Now, I would say in the US, we have the same meaning. We talk about the entrepreneurial startup companies as being the heart of the economy. And I've always looked at one of GE's responsibilities is to be able to develop a supply chain. You know, if you think about most of our businesses are we're very heavy research and development spenders, but we're broadly deverticalized. So we have a huge supply chain. And that's been our strategy for a long period of time. So we're very dependent on suppliers, almost all of whom are much smaller than we are. And we have built our financial service business really around SMEs. So in a crisis like this, you know, we're able in some ways to think about our financing capability going hand in hand with our supply chain when we think about, you know, how an SME can develop that's building doing coating on turbine blades for our aircraft engines business. And so we very much look at, particularly in times of economic crisis like right now, at the totality of our supply chain to try to find ways that we can work productively together. But it's one of the things that was missed, I think, a little bit in the commentary, at least when the first TARP bill came out in the US, was it was kind of viewed as being this fat cat, program. Whereas when liquidity dries up, it's the small business that loses it first. And that's something that, again, I think we have the ability to look out over our world and try to think of things we can do, but that's a very vulnerable part of the global economy and one that clearly the governments are most concerned about.